Good morning, students. I hope you guys are having a good week. I would like to take this opportunity to start our next topic, which is still the third characteristic of life, but genetics. So now we learned about reproduction. Genetics is the important part of reproduction because it's how your traits pass down. So on your sheet, you guys are going to be filling in this definition portion. And during this video, I'm going to go over the picture or example, which should already be on your worksheet. Let's begin. Genetics. Genetics is the study of how traits pass down from parents to offspring. Usually, genetics studies a question. For example, one question could be, where did my height come from? So my dad is super tall. My dad is over 6 feet tall. My mom is fairly short. She's about, I don't know, 5'4", 5'5". So thinking about that, I'm a fairly short person. We have to figure out, where did that come from? Probably from my mom. The next vocab term is the term chromosome, and we've talked about this term before. A chromosome is literally a chunk of DNA, and they always come in pairs. You get one from mom and one from dad, and a chromosome usually looks like this. It's got a little part in the center, and like I said, they always come in pairs. So you got this one from your mom, and then you got the second one from your dad. Humans, we actually have 23 pairs or 46 chromosomes total. You got 23 of your chunks of DNA from your mom, you got 23 of your chunks of DNA from your dad, and that's why you're a mix of your two parents. And we're going to try to learn about that a little bit today, how we become a mixture of two other individuals. The next word is the word gene. Now, if I'm talking about my chromosome, each piece of my chromosome codes for a different trait, and that is known as a gene. So if I'm looking at my chromosome, I'm going to draw my chromosome again. If I took my chromosome and cut it into different parts, these different parts are known as genes. So here's a gene, this part over here is a gene, this part in here is a gene. All of those are code to give you a specific trait. One might be height, one might be eye color, one might be hair color, for all the traits that make you who you are. Now, when we're talking about these genes can come in two different versions. And those versions are called alleles. And we usually use a letter to represent an allele or a version of a gene. So, for example, if we're talking about height, I might use the letter T. Uppercase, it's going to mean one thing, and lowercase is going to mean something else. So these letters are known as alleles. Okay? It literally is going to mean which version you got from which parent. And it really doesn't matter which parent gave you which trait, but this is one of the reasons why you might look more like mom or more like dad or have one trait from one and another trait from another. Now, when we're talking about traits, this is a different, all the characteristics. So for example, I started talking about height, so I'm going to continue talking about height. Height is an example of a characteristic. There's tons of them. Hair color, eye color, every single thing about you. It can even be a behavior. If you're a morning person or a night person, remember we studied that first semester. Those are your traits. Now, when we are talking about genetics and different traits, we are going to talk about these two words. The first word is genotype. Genotype are going to be your alleles or letters, what you got from your parents. So for height, there are three options. You could have gotten capital T, capital T. You could have gotten a capital T, a lowercase t, or a lowercase t and a lowercase t. The rule is the capital letters always go first, lowercase letters always go second. And remember, they always have to come in pairs because you got one from your mom and one from your dad. Now, which combination you get is going to determine which trait you have. So, which height you have. Are you tall or are you short? Okay. Now, phenotype is physically what you're going to be. Are you going to be, like I just said, a tall person or a short person? Now, for our purposes, we are just going to say there's two options, tall and short. I know that that's not necessarily the case with traits in real life. There's lots of different heights of people, but to make things easy for our activity today, there's only two options, tall and short, okay? Now, I have a bunch of letters up here, these alleles. So we have to figure out, how do I know which one's code for tall and which one's code for short? And that is where our final two terms come in. Our final two terms, or I guess 4 terms. The first one is the word homozygous. If you remember, homo means the same. So if the letters look the same, as in capital T, or lowercase t, that would be called homozygous. On the other hand, remember the word hetero means different. If the letters look, hetero means different. If one is capital and one is lowercase, that is known as heterozygous. Heterozygous. Okay? And then finally, our last two traits. All right. How do I know when these letters code what they code for? So there's two ways to think about this, and the words are dominant and recessive. Now, dominant is what happens if you get one or two capital letters. So if I have a capital T, a dominant allele from each parent, or one parent gave me the dominant allele and the other parent gave me the lowercase allele, I'm going to have the dominant trait. And in this case, the dominant trait is to be tall. Now, when we do these problems, we'll always start by telling you which trait is considered dominant. Now, dominant doesn't mean better, it doesn't mean best, it doesn't mean more common. Think about height. There's no dominant, it's not better to be tall versus to be short. It's just what the letters stand for. You always have to use the same letters then for the recessive trait. So if I use capital T for tall, they're both going to be the same letter but lowercase for the what we call the recessive trait. In this case, the recessive trait is to be short. Okay? So once again, these letters are your genotype. What they represent is your phenotype. If any of the letters are capital, you're dominant. You show the dominant trait. If any of the letters are, or if both letters are lowercase, you have the recessive trait. If the letters look the same, they are homozygous. If the letters look different, they're called heterozygous. So make sure you have all of these notes filled out. Once you have the notes filled out, we're going to do some practice with the notes. So if you go to the next page, the next page says, "What animal am I?" activity. It says, "Hello, all you cats and kittens. Today you're going to observe or read 2 chromosomes of an animal to determine which type of animal from the show Tiger King is being described." Just to give you guys a hint, I'm either going to be describing a lion, a tiger, or a leopard. It's okay if you haven't seen the show Tiger King on Netflix, but we are going to describe real life animals that are found in a zoo. Okay? So, scrolling down, let's look at what we're going to be doing today. It says procedure. We are going to look at our 2 chromosomes for our animal. We have to highlight in the phenotype and genotypes chart which phenotype and genotype the animal has based on the chromosomes. So, we're going to look at their chromosomes and figure out the phenotype and the genotype. Then we're going to complete a data table, which is on the next page. And finally, the very last thing is answer a final question about what type of animal is being described. Okay? So let's move down and look at our chromosomes. Now, remember, chromosomes always come in pairs. So this one came from the mom and this one came from the dad, and we're trying to figure out what the baby looks like. I'm going to start, and I'm going to just do one example with you guys. I'm going to start with this first set of chromosomes over here. So it looks like I have letters, so that probably looks to be like the letter L, maybe lowercase l's. So I'm going to go down to my chart, and if you look in our chart, okay, I see the letter L's in this chart. I see some L's over here, and I see some L's over here. So I'm going to go back up. I have 2 lowercase L's. Therefore, I'm going to stay on this part of the chart over here. The first thing we asked you guys to do is highlight which part of the chart that you had. Let's see if I can do a highlighter. Okay, and we want you to, let's see how this works. Okay, we're going to highlight over here. So what this is telling me about my animal is that its genotype is little l, and its phenotype, physically what it looks like, is that it has no mane. Remember, a mane is like what male lions have, that big area of fur all around their head. So this animal does not have a mane. I'm going to go through and do all of that highlighting for the rest of my traits. So once again, remember, you have to look up here at what's given to you and then highlight it in your chart below. Once you have that all highlighted, you're going to go to the next page and fill out a data table. So remember, for my first trait, it was little l, no mane. So when I go to the next page, I'm going to start to fill out my chart. There are 4 things to fill out. The first thing I have to fill out is genotype. Remember, genotype is what were my letters. So I had little l. Next, I have to say if it's homozygous or heterozygous. So if I have to, I'll go back to the notes and look at it. Remember, homo means the same and hetero means different. So if I look at these 2 letters, they look the same. So this is homozygous. You don't have to write the whole word if you don't want to, that's okay. Phenotype, I always remember phenotype begins with a P. Phenotype is physically, what do I see? So physically, my genotype, my genes was little l. Physically, we looked in the chart, it said no mane. Okay? No mane. Finally, dominant or recessive. Remember, if they have the dominant form of the trait, they're going to have capital letters. If I look at my genotype right now, I see no capital letters. Therefore, I know that my trait is recessive. Once again, you don't have to write the full word here. You could just write an R for recessive if you want. And I'm going to go through and do that for all of the traits. Once I have my whole chart filled out, I'm going to determine for the very end what type of animal am I describing, and I'm going to write it in the box. Like I said, it's either going to be a lion, a leopard, or a tiger. If you guys have any questions, please let us know. We'll also be doing a Google Meet today at 10 o'clock to go over any of this stuff. So if you need more help, I suggest joining the Google Meet so that you could ask your direct questions if needed. Good luck.